Months became years.
Yeah, they'll do that.
The sands on the planet Dune shifted in the wind. Paul grew into manhood as the Fremen's fearless leader.
Well, he wasn't completely fearless. He had terrible arachnophobia, but there were no spiders on Arrakis, so the problem never came up.
He continued leading his troops in raids on the Harkonnen spice mining operations. The Harkonnen losses of spice and equipment were piling up.
How could they if they were lost?
And the Baron's nephew feared he could no longer hide them from his uncle. He screamed with rage.
I will find this Muad'Dib and suck the blood from him!
Suddenly, Kevin J. Anderson gets the idea for Vampires of Dune.
Millions of light years away, on the far side of the galaxy, Emperor Shaddam IV paced nervously in his golden room.
These novels are so far-fetched. What real ruler would have a golden room?
The reason for his nervousness suddenly appeared before him. It was a first-stage navigator who had not yet changed into a third-stage navigator.
Well, that's just a really relatable fear. Suddenly the series is back on track.
The first-stage navigator's raspy voice filled the air.
Emperor Shaddam, you have failed miserably. This poor Muad'Dib, whoever he is, still lives.
I mean, I don't know who he is, so I can't say with any real certainty that he still lives. I'm just venting, I suppose.
The spices of Dune are in danger from his Fremen armies, and you and that bungling Baron Harkonnen are responsible. You must remedy this situation.
Muad'Dib is clever, but I will mount a full-scale attack.
And no, I'm probably not being played by Anthony Zerbe, even though I sound a lot like him.
Promised the Emperor.
I will activate every legion I have and send them to Dune immediately. I will attack and destroy the Fremen rabble, and this new leader of theirs as well.
Now turn the page before I change my mind.
Paul knew that if he was to help the Fremen in their final battle against the Harkonnen and the Emperor, he would need great wisdom. He would need to see the future. The only way he could do that was by drinking the mysterious, all-powerful water of life.
Or he could just get millions of zombies with no self-regard to go online and tell him he's a genius like Elon does.
Johnny, who had fallen in love with Paul, begged him not to.
Please, Paul, the water could kill you, for no man who has taken it has lived.
Relax, I've been to Blackpool Seafront.
I have no choice, my love. It is my destiny.
So Chani went with Paul and his Fremen warriors out into the desert.
Where all the water is.
There, he drank the water of life. Paul screamed as 1,000 horrors filled his mind. But he finally awakened from his nightmare, having seen the future. Returning to the Fremen, Paul announced,
The Matlock reboot will get a second season. That was really the only vision of the future I've got. Is that useful at all?
The time of the final battle has come. I know a secret our enemies do not. I know how to destroy all spice forever. And I can now fold space as well.
So there's that.
Now our enemies will fear me. Our time has come.
Paul and his Fremen warrior aides stood at the top of Arise, studying the Arakeen Palace and its defenses. They had been watching for days now.
And it had only just occurred to them that they'd forgotten to bring binoculars.
And waiting. They had watched as the Emperor's forces landed, and watched as his steel tent extended down below his own ship, serving as his palace and protective cover.
Yeah, I can't imagine a steel tent becoming impossibly hot in the middle of a friggin' desert.
Now is the time to begin.
Paul said evenly, studying the sky.
A sandstorm is developing, as planned. Larger and more fierce than anything ever known before.
And who does Marjorie Taylor Greene blame for that?
And what about the Sandworms?
They are on their way, Muad'Dib.
A Fremen responded.
We have put out thousands of thumpers to attract them. Just listen.
It was true.
I literally had no reason to doubt it. Are you trying to turn me against this storybook for your own reasons?
Their thumping roared across the desert like thunder.
This will be a gathering of worms the likes of which no one has ever seen before.
Paul exclaimed.
Although nobody's ever really looked before, he added.
And so it was. The desert sand rose like ocean waves as hundreds of worms approached. Waiting to ride them, hooks ready, were the Fremen warriors. Meanwhile, at the Arakeen Palace, Baron Harkonnen was ordered to rush to Shaddam's tent.
With a bucket, the shitter was full again.
The Emperor was angry.
Your mistakes forced me to come here. Your cruel treatment of the people on Dune has caused a rebellion among the Fremen.
I don't actually have a riff for this bit. I just wanted to point out that there's an unexpectedly long and awkward pause at this point in the record, and it should go remarked upon.
At that moment, a small girl in long black robes entered. It was Alia, Paul's sister. Alia announced,
I am the messenger from Muad'Dib, Paul Muad'Dib, who is really Paul Atreides.
In case you were mistaking him for Bob Muad'Dib. It's a common mistake. They often get each other's mail.
Before the Emperor and the Baron could get over their shock, loud explosions were heard outside the tent.
Which weren't shocking at all.
Paul and the Fremen had begun their attack. Enraged, the Baron grabbed for Alia, but she jabbed a poisoned needle into his face, crying,
Here is the revenge of the Atreides family!
And also that needle we borrowed at the same time as your orbital sander.
The Baron gasped and died as another huge explosion burst open the steel wall of the Emperor's tent.
I wish they'd stop saying tent. Feel like I'm listening to the sci-fi equivalent of Carry On Camping.
Harkonnen's fat body, which was floating in midair, was sucked out of the hole in the wall, only to be swallowed by one of the attacking sandworms.
Mondays, am I right?
They've broken through the outer shield wall!
Shaddam shouted in panic.
I am under attack!
Infamy, infamy, they've all got it in for me. See, it is a carry-on.
Quickly, Your Majesty! Into your ship for safety!
Yelled the captain of his personal guard.
I totally won't tell them that's where you went in exchange for my life.
Alia laughed as she ducked out, escaping into the confusion of the battle raging around the Arakeen Palace. Thousands of explosions illuminated the sandstorm as it swirled over everything.
But pretty much everything else was also sand, so it didn't make that much of a difference, honestly.
And out of the darkness came the Fremen Sand Riders, hundreds mounted on each worm. The sandworms and their riders poured through the broken shield wall and scattered the terrified legions of the Emperor. Most of the troops were either swallowed or crushed by the sandworms.
The last words of every single soldier being, please say I died peacefully in my bed surrounded by my family, not underneath a big-ass worm.
And those that were left met their fate at the hands of the Fremen warriors. When the victorious Fremen entered Arakeen Palace, Paul ordered his prisoners brought before him.
Along with a boneless bucket from KFC, he was absolutely Aunt Marvin.
Paul leveled his gaze at the defeated Emperor.
I have true power now,
he said.
I can destroy all the spice which gave you and the Bene Gesserit your special powers.
How dare you speak to me that way?
Not even sounding a bit like Kyle MacLachlan,
retorted the Emperor. Then turning to Fade, the Baron's evil nephew, Shaddam said,
Here, Fade, take my knife and fight this Paul Atreides.
Fade took the Emperor's knife and stepped forward, opposite Paul.
Don't stand so close to Fade.
The two began to circle each other, each looking for a weakness in the other. Soon, they were rolling on the floor, grappling, each with a knife seeking the other's throat.
It's right underneath the head, it's not that hard to find.
Suddenly, Fade shifted his body and lifted his leg.
Muad'Dib!
Johnny screamed.
He has a poisoned dart hidden on his leg!
Just as the dart was about to plunge into Paul, he flung his body to one side, and, in the same movement, his own knife found Fade's throat.
If you look at photos of Sting in the movie, he's really not making much of a job of hiding it. Or much else.
Paul rose to his feet, triumphant. Throwing down his knife, he announced,
Can someone pick that up for me?
I no longer need a knife or a weirding module. for I now can kill with a word.
Which escapes me for the moment, so try not to murder me before I remember it.
The Fremen chanted.
Paul Muad'Dib, you are truly the leader our legend promised us.
Shani exclaimed.
In the remake, Zendaya had already left by this point.
Paul's blue eyes shone. There would be justice and peace in the known universe at last.
As for the unknown universe, well, no one would ever know about it, as the name implies.
Suddenly, a downpour of rain, life-giving, life-sustaining rain, began to fall on Dune.
Making any sequels David Lynch intended to make extremely complicated. And he wrote the script.
And gathered outside the palace walls, jubilant Fremen raised their voices as one, in triumph.
For about the next 10 minutes. After that, they started complaining about the rain. Well, that's it for this audio riff of Dune. But if you join me on Patreon, you'll have access to over 120 more riffs. I know. And plenty of other goodies too. Thanks for joining me. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe.